Okay, welcome to this video tutorial where today we're going to be taking a look at using Adobe Illustrator for inking some cartoon artwork. So firstly, the reason I use Adobe Illustrator for some of my assignments is that if I create something at say 12 inches high, I know that if it goes to print and it needs to be 12 feet high, it'll enlarge without losing any quality to the image. Unlike a bitmap program, if you create something at 12 inches and then try and blow it up to 12 feet, it'll start to pixelate, break apart and lose some quality. So that's the reason I use Illustrator, and plus it's got a nice clean style which also suits me for the cartoon based work. A lot of the assignments I get are very cartoony, Illustrator based, so it works very well for me on some of these assignments. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a sketch. It's just a sketch I've created with a pencil paper. I've just scanned it in and we're going to import it into this document and we're going to start inking over the top of it. So first things first, let's bring in the drawing. So I've got a nice new document here. I've done nothing yet, just created a new document, and we're going to come over here to File, and just below halfway we've got Place. And on the other screen here I've got this window I'll bring over. This is the source file I want, so I'm just going to click place, and it's now placed it onto our document. So if we go zooming in, take a look at this image, it's just a cartoon cyborg, I guess you'd say. It's just created with pencil on a piece of copy paper. And you can see it's nice and sketchy, you know, it's just pencil lines. Proportionally I've got the character how I want it. You know, I spent a bit of time creating the structure, going over the top, and you know, getting it to the point I want it to be. I'm happy with that, so now I'm going to start inking over the top. So what we'll do is we'll get this layer into a position where we can start to ink on top. Now at the moment we can select this and move it around, but we want this to be held in place, because if it starts being selected accidentally and moved around, when we ink on top we might misplace things. So it's important that we lock this layer down. So first off we need the layer menu open. So if it's not open, hit F7, which is your shortcut, or come up to Window, and round about here we've got the layers here, so select that. So make sure your layers are open because we'll be working on various different layers here. So as I say, this layer we need to lock down, so there's a couple of ways we can do this. We're also going to take the transparency down just so it's easier on the eye when we start to ink on top, that the image isn't too heavy, but we still need to be able to see it clearly. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. We can select the image, come up to transparency, knock it down, and then lock the layer. That's one way of doing it. A shorter way is to just come over to the layer, click on this fly out here, and about 3/4 of the way down, just that word there, template, just hit that. It's taken the opacity down and locked it, so we can't move this now, so we can create layers on top and start inking. So what we're going to do is create a new layer. So come down here, new layer, and here you'll see we've created layer 2. I always like to name layers as I go, so I'm just going to double click that layer. I'm going to call this just inks 1 for the time being, and here you'll notice this colour here. This allows you to change the colour of the tools in that layer. So it's red at the moment, so what this means is if we use, for instance, the pen tool, you'll see all the points and lines are highlighted in red. If we double click and change it to say green, you'll see we have green there, and that's highlighted here in these layers, and that comes in useful later on for when we start colouring this image. Say a part of this is green, the sleeve is green say, and then on a layer on top we need to draw on top of it. If the layer's green, we're not going to be able to see what we're doing clearly, so we would double click and maybe change it to something that will contrast against the green, maybe something like red, for instance. So put it back to red there. Okay. And before we start inking, I just want to point out a very important thing regarding some of these tools. The line tool, for instance, and these tools here. If I take the ellipse tool, and I'm just going to come down to this here, where we've got these lights on his wrist. Okay, I'm just going to take the fill off, so we've just got the stroke. Okay, so what we've got here, we've got this circle, and if we go up to the stroke menu, we see here it's got a weight of 1, so if we move this up to 2, it gets thicker and thicker as we move it up. So what happens here is, because it's a stroke, what will happen if we shrink this down, it will always be a stroke of 1. So if we shrink this down, it's going to look thicker. And also if we enlarge it, it's going to look thinner, but it's still got a stroke of 1. Now when we complete this artwork and we want to enlarge it, what will happen if we don't change this? It's just going to look thinner, and if we shrink it, it's going to look thicker. So what we need to do is change the way that this piece of the image works. So I'm just going to duplicate this. I'm just going to Control C and V, so we've got a copy there, just so we can see the difference that we're about to make. Okay, so select this, then you go to Object, Expand, and you'll see here it's asking me if I want to expand the fill and the stroke. We've just got a stroke, but it doesn't matter if we've got a fill enabled there. Just click OK, and you'll see immediately the difference between these two. So this is the original stroked version. This is the new expanded version. So you'll see the difference there. Now if I shrink these, you see that there? This one's kept the stroke of 1, this one's gone down in proportion. And again, if we want to go the other way and enlarge this, you'll see that this has kept a stroke of 1 and this has enlarged in proportion. So this is very important to mention this early on, because when you complete this image and say you send it to a printers and you've forgotten to expand these pieces, when the client or yourself gets the image back, things aren't going to look right. So it's very, very important that early on that you remember this. So we will be using these tools during the lesson. So what we'll do, as soon as we create anything with a stroke, we'll expand it there and then. Okay, let's take that away. And I think at this point we can begin the inking. Now what I'm going to do is show you a couple of different ways to use the pen tool. Now first off, let's take a look at the pen tool. If you're not familiar with it, it's this icon here. So we just select it, and down here these icons, the full filled out block here, this is a fill. So if you've got this selected and this one behind, that's the stroke. If that's got the strike through, the red line through it, what this means is when we draw with a pen, it's going to create just a fill. If we swap this using this arrow, so we've now got no fill and a stroke, we're just drawing with a stroke. Now of course, bearing in mind this is a stroke, what we can do here is we can change the weight of it. But again, if you're going to be using a stroke, remember that once you've drawn with it, come over to here and expand it. So again, let's quickly just go over this again with this new shape, just so we can drum this into our minds that it's important to make this change. Go to Object, Expand, OK. So let's bring these down. There you can see the difference immediately. So that's using the stroke on the pen. So if you're going to use the stroke method on the pen, it's important that we do change that. But also, what you can do is you can draw with a stroke, and then you can decide to fill it with a colour. So say you want to fill it with black, just hit the black here and then select the stroke. You can delete that. So now we've just got a fill. So there's a few different ways you can use the pen. I tend to use both. I go between one and the other depending on the part of the image I'm looking at. Sometimes it's easier to use a stroke, sometimes it's easier to use the fill. Okay, let's use, just to demonstrate this, I'm going to go back to stroke, and to use the pen, obviously if we click a point then another point, we get a straight line like so, and then if we click the next point and pull, we create a curve. Now if I just click again, it's going to continue the curve, and then when I click again it's going to be straight. So the first thing we need to look at using this pen is getting the hang of this method. So again, one point to the next is straight, but then if you click again and curve and then click again, you've got another curve, then it goes straight. But say you want to do one curve and then go back to straight. So here we want a curve, now we want a straight line again. All we need to do is come over to this point, hover above it, and you'll see that little upside down V next to the pen. Just click on that point and it takes away one of those handles. So now when we click, we've got straight lines again. So let's demonstrate this again. We've got two handles. So if we click on that point, there we go. So here we've got a curve. If we keep going around like this without clicking those points, we've just got continuous curves. And to break that and go back to straight, we do this, and so on. Okay, let's clear this. And now what we're going to do is take a look at how we manipulate some of the points. So say we trace a part of this. So for instance, say this here. So let's come from this point to this point. I'm going to pull to curve, and I'm going to click here to break the curve, and let's come just halfway up here. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to miss the mark and come out too far. Now for instance, say I want to move this point over. All I need to do is deselect and come to the direct selection tool, which is the white arrow, second one down, and I just need to click the point, because with this tool we can click individual points and move them. So here, if I click this one, I can move it around, and also by clicking this you'll see it brings up the handlebars, which means we can very carefully and precisely maneuver these curves around. So here we could maybe pull this out a touch more, or we could go the other way if we wanted to. So with this direct selection tool, this enables us to very precisely move the path. If we're using the tool above, the arrow tool here, the black one, it's just going to select everything. We're not going to be able to select one point. This is the tool we'll use if we want to move the whole piece or change its size, skew it, and so on. So make sure you remember, if you want to manipulate just a small piece of that line, it's the direct selection tool, the white one. So just select the point and start to play this way like so. So you can see there's quite a lot of control you can have over these lines. Let's turn this layer off so you can just see that nice swoop there. Okay, let's delete this. And very quickly, I just want to show you the brush tool. Now this is something I won't use too much on an image, but on occasion it will get used if for instance there's a wavy line or something like that. So all I'm going to do is just again demonstrate this very quickly, that if we draw that line there, you'll see there that it moves it slightly. So being a vector program, what it does, it moves the points where it needs to be mathematically. So this is the reason I don't use the brush tool for inking, because you can see that it shifts it slightly. But if I'm, say, inking some curly hair or something like that, or maybe up here, for instance, this this piece of the brain that's encased here, you could get away with just using it there. I would take the thickness down, but again, this is very important to remember that this tool also is a stroke tool. We can take this up and down, so if we do use this brush tool, again we need to remember to expand this. On the brush tool it'll be expand appearance and then expand, and then when we bring this down we've kept it in proportion. So I just wanted to quickly show you the brush tool, just in case you're sitting there and thinking, well, why not just use the brush tool for inking? It's for that reason that it's not so precise. You know, you can come around here and it'll shift a little bit, and then you have to go in and expand it and so on. With the pen tool, as I was demonstrating with the points, you can get it very precise. You've got a lot more control over it. It will take longer to complete your image, but ultimately I think by the time you get to the end of it, you'll be pleased with the results, and after a bit of practice you will become more proficient and faster using the tools. So what we're going to do is move on to the inking. Okay, so what I've got is the pen tool selected. I've made sure that our scanned and imported image is locked down and the opacity is taken down slightly, and we're on the layer above, Inks 1, and what we're going to do is just go in and start anywhere we like. There's no hard and fast rule where to start on an image. It's just wherever you're comfortable, you can move from one piece to the next. It's a very free flowing process. So I think what I might do is start with the gun. So I'm just going to zoom in, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the way that I use the pen tool. So I tend to favour using a fill over a stroke. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, let's start with this piece here. I'm just going to click here, come down, then here we'll curve and up to here, and you'll see instantly that we can't see inside this design, but this is okay because I know roughly how thick I want this line to be, and I've also got a guideline. So all I need to do is just come along here, come down and click and pull, click to make this straight again, come up and there, and there's our first piece completed. So if we turn off this layer, we can zoom in, we can see we've got a very nice crisp clean image there, and if we want to tweak this we can. So again, direct selection tool, so here I may want to move this slightly, So remember, the sketch beneath is your guideline. I mean, for the most part it's how you want it, but there's no rule saying that you have to follow everything precisely. And remembering it's a sketch, so you know, we've got some things there we can change as we go along. Okay, so let's come up to this next piece here, and what you want to do is keep the line weight consistent as you're drawing. Bear that in mind, but remember, using the direct selection tool you can go in and tweak that very easily. So I'm just zooming out to see if I'm happy with the overall line weight before I go too far. I mean, we could go thicker if we wanted to. Okay, let's show you another method using the pen tool. So select the pen tool, and now we're going to use a stroke, and we're going to pretty much do the same. Come up to about here. Now here you'll see we have a thinner line, and this here isn't matching, so I'm just going to grab the direct selection tool, bring this down, play with the curve, and I want to take the stroke up the weight, so let's try 2. So it's a little bit thicker, but it's not too bad. Plus you can use increments inside here, so you could actually go 1.65 for instance. That matches quite well. So at this point, remember, we've used a stroke, so the important thing to remember here is to expand this. So there we go. What we've done, we've essentially turned it into what this first piece is. And what we can do now is, you'll see here we've got all the different points, but what it tends to do with the stroke version, and then you expand it, is it adds a few more points there. So here you can see we've got a point, here we've got a point, and then we've got the 2 edge ones, whereas here we've just got the 2 edge ones. So this shape, where it hasn't been converted and I've had more control over where I place the points, it's easier to manipulate, and with less points it takes down the file size very slightly too. So something else to bear in mind, but you can work this way if you like, and using the direct selection tool again you can come in and change things. So you could, you know, move these out, but remember you're getting extra points in here along the way. So I just wanted to show you that way of working too, which is at some point we will be using. And also what you'll see here, we've got some overlap in these points. Now what this is part of that first point, this first portion cutting through. So an easy way to fix that is, obviously we'll be using the direct selection tool to select that and bring it down. Keeping an eye down here, you don't want to bring it in and then realise you've made this thinner. So that's one way of doing it. What I like to do is lock the piece that it's near, so we don't move this piece. So what we can do is select this piece, go up to Object, Lock Selection. So now this is locked, but this piece I need to move. I can simply grab any point without fear of selecting anything on any other existing artwork pieces and just move there, and then remembering to unlock it. So you could go Object, Unlock All, and there we go. Okay, so let's bring back the Cyborg. Okay, this piece here, this is just kind of a cosmetic part of the design. So just quickly to show you one of 2 ways to do this. I could come in and use the fill tool, and the nice thing about this is I can vary this a little bit. So I could make maybe the bottom bit thicker, and this part, as it goes around and further away from us, we could make that thinner. So I'm just closing that off there. Okay, so we've got a nice variation in line width there. Of course, the other way of doing that is just use the stroke method. If I try it out on this piece here, so we've got a uniform line which also looks nice. So it all depends what way you want to go. I mean, feel free to use both, and I think even I'll leave this in there just to add more to the design, because you'll see it's a nice simple design, but you can go in and embellish it a little bit. You know, you might find with this helmet piece that later on you might find that, oh, I want to add something on, I've had an idea. You can go in and do that. You don't need to be sticking to your base drawing absolutely close, you know, with the details. You can change it if you like.